Hello, welcome to the next episode of Listen to Your Eyes, a podcast presented by Amgen for people who have a thyroid condition and are experiencing problems with their eyes. Throughout this series, you can learn more about thyroid eye disease, or TED, and hear from physicians, caregivers, and others who discovered that their eye symptoms were actually TED. My name is Lauren Friedman. I'm a health coach, patient advocate, and the host and creator of Uninvisible Pod, a podcast about living with non-apparent chronic conditions and disabilities. I also live with Hashimoto's disease, which we're going to be talking about on the show today. And today we'll be joined by Hannah Corbin, a fellow Hashimoto's and autoimmune warrior who is also a star Peloton instructor. So hi, Hannah.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely awesome to chat with you today. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about Hannah's journey with Hashimoto's disease and how it's impacted the last 5+ years of her life. Hannah will share her experience of living with thyroid disease, what she's learned since her diagnosis, and the importance of self-advocacy. So let's get started.
Let's do it.
Hannah, can you take us back to when you first realized something was off with your health?
What a time it was. About 5 years ago, my health just completely turned upside down. And like it is for many of us, it wasn't overnight. It was a gradual shift. So it was hard to pinpoint and hard to explain to others what I was feeling. But overall, I was exhausted. Doesn't even begin to describe it, but I'll say exhausted for lack of a better word, because I was truly exhausted every moment of every day. And it felt like a heavy curtain was being pulled over my eyes. I could barely keep them open. I could barely stay awake. I felt like a baby that needed to nap all the time and didn't know how to function, which was such a foreign feeling for me, being a very active person and loving to move my body and celebrate and sweat. So for more than 2 years, I was going to doctors and I wasn't getting any answers. And I was told that my exhaustion was probably because of being so active, which didn't totally make sense, but it's hard to explain to others and compare how tired you are, whether you're comparing it to a friend with multiple children who's also a different level of exhausted. If you're just talking to someone who is a fellow New Yorker like me, we're all, busy, for lack of a better word, all the time. There's all a certain level of exhaustion no matter what life you've chosen for yourself. But my weight was fluctuating. I tried to take matters into my own hands. I started working out more, even though I barely had the energy to, pour my coffee. I was trying to limit excess in my diet, which I'm not a person who believes in restriction, but I was like, maybe I'm eating in the wrong order. Let me add more greens, more nutrients. Maybe that's what I'm lacking in my life. And nothing worked. So I kept having to push and needed to convince others that something was in fact wrong, because multiple people time after time would tell me, you're fine. And I had to just repeat, you're saying I'm fine, but I'm telling you that I'm not, and continuing to advocate for myself. So for the first time ever, I was pulling back from work because of that exhaustion. I was no longer doing the things that filled my cup, which I think was the most disruptive to my life, those little things that you take for granted that just give you joy on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And that's when I finally was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease. And, that gave me at least one answer to get the treatment that I needed and start feeling like the best version of myself again.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It is so rich in lessons, I think, for people tuning in. The idea that you're walking around with this heavy curtain to describe the exhaustion, which I've heard some people describe as functional exhaustion, and it seems to be the thing that sort of like gets caregivers to really understand how much that exhaustion is affecting your day to day. But this idea of like a heavy curtain or like walking around with a weighted blanket shrouding your every move, is so spot on. And I can relate so much to what you're talking about. And this idea that other people are saying you're fine and you're like, I'm not fine. I went through that too. And let's just as a society just stop telling people they're fine when they're not fine. Right?
I am with you.
Big one. But man, there is a good proportion of us who get diagnosed with Hashimoto's eventually, right? Because it takes a while as well, who really struggle to make our way through. And I'm wondering, Hannah, if you can give our listeners a brief description of Hashimoto's disease itself and how this is different from Graves' disease.
Sure. So Hashimoto's disease is an autoimmune condition, and the most common form of it is hypothyroidism, which I have, or underactive thyroid. So, through this diagnosis and through educating myself and continuing to advocate for my health, I've learned a lot about it, knowing that now thyroid hormones are what contribute to your weight, to your energy, and to all of these other bodily functions that, from my story, we found, and yours, that it's less than to not have the function of all of those things,
Yeah.
right? So my thyroid was producing very low levels of hormone, causing my energy, my metabolism to slow down. And there's also separately, there's a different autoimmune disease known as Graves' disease. So that's hyperthyroidism, which means that the thyroid is producing too much hormone, and you can experience weight loss, insomnia, and a ton of other symptoms. They're similar yet different, two sides of the same coin in the thyroid spectrum.
And I'm wondering, because you mentioned it took a few years to get this diagnosis, which is a pretty common narrative that we hear as well. Mm-hmm. So how did you feel when you got that diagnosis? Was it difficult for you emotionally, or was it like, oh, total relief?
It was such a combo. I immediately bawled my eyes out, but I was also at that point just very easily emotional, probably because of the exhaustion, because of just the lack of regular functioning in my system and my universe. And I had to step back and mourn the story that I had written about myself. All of the mantras and the lessons that I try and teach others on, whether it's the Peloton platform or just through social media, is to treat your body like it belongs to someone you love. And it's really, put to the test of, do you love it in all its forms? What does healthy mean to you, and how do you redefine it? Because formerly I viewed healthy, and I'll put it in quotes, as free of disease, right? But if you have a thyroid disease like we have, what is healthy now? And having to redefine that celebration in sweat for myself, that continuing of hydration, that putting one foot in front of the other, because you're allowed to be sad, right? Diagnosis is hard in any form, and admitting any version of weakness or seemingly less than attributes, right? It's just hard to talk about at first. And I truly believe that you can be upset, you can cry 10 times, right? But we can't unpack and live there. So, let it out, do your thing, but remember that we have to continue to put one foot in front of the other. And so after I had my moment of just, why me, right? I've taken the vitamins, I've done the sleep, I don't smoke, all of those things. And once you get past the woe is me, the sadness, then I was able to recognize the relief of, I had been living without answers for so long, and to finally see that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, because it was starting to feel like it wasn't there. It was starting to feel like a never-ending tunnel. And knowing, oh, okay, if I just continue, it's going to take a minute, right? I have to get the medicine right, and I have to have the right team around me, and continue even in the good moments, but especially in the bad, to advocate for my health. But there is a better version of this being my my existence, right? How I present myself to the world in my future. And once finally someone reminded me that that was there, I could begin to feel like myself again.
I'm choking up just hearing your story because it's just same, right? Same, but different, same. And being able to know that we're not the only ones going through this experience is such a huge part of that too, isn't it? Being able to find other people who can relate to the both and of the grief and the joy in knowing that there is a way forward through this thing, that now we've got a treatment plan, and I'm wondering, aside from navigating that emotional journey, what have you learned since your diagnosis?
Goodness, my initial reaction is, what have I not learned, right? I mean, I've learned that we're more than what our bodies can't do, which is such a simple statement, but was a really profound one for me. It was so easy for me to really focus and concentrate on all the things that were going wrong. And once I shifted that mentality to everything that could go right, all of the possibilities in front of me, I was saying this the other day in class, like it was that moment where I realized the glass isn't half full. It's not half empty either. It is refillable. And
Yes.
knowing that, this is my story, I can hit you with a plot twist at any moment, just empowered me to not only feel better, but to then start to help others who are in similar situations. So I used to refer to it as autoimmune, and I refer to it as auto-amazing now, because it's that type of shift that has, again, continued to allow me to put one foot in front of the other. And, the thing that I've learned about having a thyroid condition is that, we're at risk for developing other conditions like thyroid eye disease or TED, a separate but related autoimmune condition that require separate care. So in this continuation of advocating for my own health and also sharing that journey with others, I've noticed that these symptoms for TED, they can vary, right? It might be eye bulging, it might be double vision, eye pain, redness. It can even lead to vision loss in some cases. And, you know better than anyone that all of this can have such a profound effect on people's emotional well-being and can get in the way of doing the things that you love and feeling like the best version of yourself. So, I've really learned that treating your body like it belongs to someone you love is so important. And it's always been my mantra, but continuing to do so when everything feels like it's falling apart around you is when it's the most important.
I think that's so beautifully said. I'm wondering also what advice you have for others who are living with a thyroid condition. You're such a wealth of understanding and knowledge. So what would you tell people who are going through a similar experience?
Similar to treating your body like it belongs to someone you love, that in workouts, it means not treating it like it felt 6 years ago and not treating it like you want it to feel 6 months from now. But how does it feel in this moment, in this breath, with whether it's the sinuses around you or the lack of napping in our life, right? It can affect us all. And that's the same with symptoms. So with thyroid disease, it's important to respond to whatever your body is trying to tell you. But in order to do that, you have to listen. And as I've found, is you have to listen and you have to advocate for yourself, which means, taking your symptoms seriously and speaking up if something feels wrong.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. I want to thank you again, Hannah, for being here to talk about your experience with Hashimoto's. And I'm curious what inspired you to share your story publicly.
There's a lot of versions of this answer, and it all comes down to wanting to empower those around me to continue to advocate, because I think we get frustrated when it's, not the first person that we ask for help that's able to always do it. So making sure the right team is around you. And, I really want to encourage everyone living with Hashimoto's or Graves' or another thyroid condition to pay close attention to their eyes, because everyone with a thyroid condition is at risk. And your risk of thyroid eye disease is even greater if you live with Graves' disease, which is the most common form of hyperthyroidism. Now that I know my risk for TED, I'm watching my eyes closely. So if you have a thyroid condition, it's important to monitor your eyes for any changes like bulging or double vision and pain, and to schedule an appointment with a TED eye specialist like an oculoplastic surgeon or a neuro-ophthalmologist if you're experiencing any changes in your eyes. That's my plan, so I don't take any chances. And I also want the same for my auto amazing friends.
And that's what I love about doing this podcast too, because we're spreading so much awareness, not just about living with these thyroid conditions, but also about what to look out for if it hasn't hit you, and find others in the community who are probably experiencing something similar. I'm wondering as well, you talked about the cup being refillable, right? It's not about it being empty or being full. It's refillable. And do you have any tips, or can you share with us how you refill your cup?
I think there's a lot of tiers to my treat your body like it belongs to someone you love. I think one of those things is a celebration in sweat. And that's taking time for yourself. Like I've learned over the years, especially when I'm tired, and rest is key. Let's put that out there officially. But I mean, it can be simple, right? Working out isn't a punishment. It's a blessing to be sore. And there was a time where I was too tired. I was too exhausted. I was too blah. I felt too old. I was injured. And realizing in the special moments that you are none of those things is the best time to celebrate. For me, it's also hydrating more than I am now, eating the way that I want to feel. I've told my husband that before, and he said, "What if I want to feel like pizza?" And I said, "You go on with your bad self." So there's that. But then also to treat your tired, hardworking muscles with some love on and off of whatever version of celebration of sweat that is. So, if you too can switch autoimmune to auto amazing and focus on all the things that your bodies can do, that's where the joy starts.
Yeah. And I love that you really point out how individual that's going to be, that one person's needs might be different from another, and that indulgence is part of that joy, as well as that taking care of yourself like someone you love. These are all such integral ideas that we need to really understand deep in our bones when conditions like autoimmune or amazing conditions hit us. And is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up today?
I hope that, some of my personal mantras can help you and others out there. And if anyone listening has a great one that has gotten them through the low, dark moments, I would love to hear it. I think we glow differently when we have the right people around us, including, our healthcare team that's going to help us in that advocation for ourselves. But turning autoimmune into auto amazing has just been the game changer for me. I remember when I was diagnosed that my husband turned to me when I was bawling my eyes out, and he said, "If you could do all of this feeling like that, imagine what you can do once you start to feel even 10% better." And I remember through my ugly cry, just being like, "Yeah, you're right."
That's some good husband right there.
Oh my goodness. Well, and he wasn't my husband at the time, but he sure is now. But I think we're only as great as the people around us, and making sure that circle is the one that's lifting us up, because, we have to be in charge of that too. It's not up to others to make us feel good, but they certainly shouldn't be making it more difficult. So, if you've seen a doctor and you haven't gotten answers, feel empowered to advocate for your own health and find another doctor. You don't owe that person anything. Seek another opinion. Keep looking until you find a doctor that makes you feel heard and that helps you get the best possible care. So, continue to treat your body like it belongs to someone you love, and, written with that THY, like it's a love thyself situation.
I love that. And thank you for inspiring us on the Glow Up today. All of the advice you have given today, Hannah, is just so full of important reminders and advice. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in to today's episode of Listen to Your Eyes. For more information about thyroid eye disease, visit focusonted.com and join the Listen to Your Eyes Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube communities. And until next time, listen to your eyes.